Wow. Beautiful people. I see a whole lot of beautiful people. Hey, I am so thrilled, along with Susan, that you are here and that we're going on this healing journey together. I am seeing the increase of God's presence and His power that is absolutely transforming people. And as I gather in different places, whether it's with other church leaders, whether it's with our own leadership team, we start telling the stories and we realize God is absolutely increasing, ramping up the healing of people in every realm, as Susan just expressed. And that was such a great job, by the way. Susan, thank you, really. We're going to continue to meet every third Saturday of the month. This was the only exception because it was Easter last weekend. We figured it wasn't a great time to gather everyone. But with the exception of this month, we're going to continue to meet every third Saturday. Next, in May, Susan, who you just heard, is going to be the one sharing. She's been over our inner healing ministry for the last decade or so. She is phenomenal. You just got a little taste of her today. But I'm saying that the reason we're going to have her share is because if we ignore the inner part of what's going on with people and you only are praying for the external physical part, so often you're going to miss the bigger thing that God is doing. And as she just shared in that brief testimony, and she has these testimonies all the time from work. How cool is that? Because most of you in this room are not full-time ministers of a church. Most of you are out in the marketplace in some way, shape, or form. You get to do this stuff everywhere you go, and you got someone who's modeling it for you. She just makes it natural. She just loves people, and by the love, they want her to help. And so next month, the third Saturday in May, she's going to be sharing a lot more about the inner healing. It'll go a little bit into deliverance. What do we believe about deliverance, and how is that tied into inner healing? There's a tie-in there. So if you're curious about all that, and I'm going to be here. Then that's next month. 2 months from now is Joanne Moody. I don't know if you got a chance to see her at Jesus Awakening. She is phenomenal. She's a fireball. She is full of love. Everybody we bring here is going to be full of love, because that's our ultimate core value here, as Susan just said. But it's going to have just different flavors and different things you're going to be learning. And 3 months from now, which is July, Dr. Susan will be back. And each time she comes, like tonight, today she's focusing on cancer. Each time she's going to focus on a different realm of healing, like a different aspect of a lot of the diseases that we happen to see in people. She's like, let's tackle that one. So today it's going to be cancer. July it'll be something else. All right. So I just want to give you a little heads up of what's coming. I just want to bless you. I want to bless you, and I want to thank you for your generosity to us. And Jesus, thanks that you, Papa, Holy Spirit, you're continuously generous. Thanks for pouring out all that we need. Thank you for all the riches that are ours in Christ Jesus. Help us, Lord, to keep moving from that place of sometimes feeling like we're an orphan that does not have, to knowing we are sons and daughters that have full inheritance and full access to the kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, Suzanne and I had the great privilege just 2 mornings ago to have a breakfast with Dr. Susan. We've been hanging out with her fairly regularly, really not primarily for business reasons, like talking about this conference, which we talked a little bit about, but mostly because we really love her, and she's an amazing person, just full of the sweetness and the kindness of God. And she just brings the medical understanding and know-how, tries to put it in a way we can understand, but she has married that with the promises and the miracles of Jesus, and with tremendous results. And you know what's best of all is she doesn't have any desire to keep this to herself and be a one-man, one-woman show. And that's what's happening in the body of Christ. So she wants to come and give it away. So would you honor, please, with me, Dr. Susan Richards?
Wonderful. I'm just so happy to be with you all. I love coming back every few months to do the trainings with my dear friends at how I know them originally as Blazing Fire Church. And so it's just a joy to be back here. And I'm really excited about doing these kinds of trainings, because it really does reflect what everyone who prays for the sick is going to encounter. And it's very helpful to have the medical aspect come into play. A lot of what I hear from the churches is kind of a frustration around wanting to see more healing. Seeing the church family not be as healed as they would like. How many of you have been to some of our events? Wow. I should ask how many of you haven't. Okay, just a few. So do you all know pretty much about the ministry that we do? And you all know about how it began and my own background? Everybody pretty clear on that? Anybody doesn't? Okay, great. I don't have to do a whole lot of dialogue about how I came into this. So mostly I just want to remind you all that in terms of background, I have kind of an unusual background in that I'm both a medical doctor and I'm ordained as a minister. It's kind of unusual because usually you have the doctors on the one side and the ministers on the other. So I'm very grateful to God for having done this because I love both sides of my work. I love the medical side and I also love the ministry side. And they marry so beautifully together. It's really a beautiful thing to see them combined. So again, I don't really have to go into much about the background. Just for a 1-minute reminder, I am from the Palo Alto area. That's where I'm located. And that's where I had my practice. And during that time that I was strictly doing practice, I was seeing patients, and then I was doing a lot of teaching. I was on the teaching faculty over at Stanford on the medical school, so I did a lot of training for doctors, residents, medical students, people in the PA program. And then about 6.5 to 7 years ago, that all switched. That's when the Lord led me into ministry. Currently, I don't do any medical training at Stanford at all anymore. I currently do ministry there. So for the last couple years, I've been part of Christian ministry at the school. So it's a really nice change going from medical to the ministry there. And it really reflects what I do. So again, you all know that I had a very strong history working in the ICU. So that's really where God was training me to see impossible miracles from the medical side. That's where I saw in the Bay Area many dead people come back to life and people who are quadriplegics walk again. So that was my background. And then just, as kind of a catch-up, God's kind of led the ministry in steps. After doing 2 or 3 days a week in the ICUs and the burn units and the critical care units and seeing incredible miracles, the Lord started to expand what we were doing. And at that time, he had me do a Facebook page, which currently has about 1,200,000 followers. It's totally his page. When I started it and it was my page, it was disaster. We had like 10 people. And nobody cared about the medical page at all. But they love God's page. We have millions of people coming on the page. And he's so kind and so loving. And we've seen so many beautiful healings. And then what I really want to just spend a couple minutes on now is just what we're doing currently, because that's, even from when I saw you all a few months ago, things have shifted for our ministry. God is working with it so dramatically. So we didn't really become a ministry until about 1 year and 4 months ago. That's when we actually had a bunch of doctors and some nurses and a research pharmacist come together to do this kind of training that I'm doing with all of you today and every time I come back here. And we did our first class last year, or first classes. We had a 5-month class. There were 14 medical doctors and a few nurses and a research pharmacist. We did a 5-month program of training people how the human body works. Now, it's different than what I'm doing with you all. It was really a system-by-system approach, almost like you're in medical school taking an anatomy class and physiology and immunology. And most of the people were senior pastors and prayer intercessors and from healing rooms and houses of prayer. We had a wonderful, wonderful time during the 5 months. We were at a church in Palo Alto, And one of the joys for me was we were working with people who were so dedicated and very much experienced in doing prayer healing. But the combination of the two was really effective because we had senior pastors who'd been pastoring for 30 years who were starting to see miracles they had never seen. And again, it's the combining of the love, which of course is number one. That's what I love about my dear friends at Blazing Fire and East Bay, because they are all about love first. There's no question where their heart is. And that's got to be number one, has to be number one. And then faith and trust in the Lord. And now it's the time where God is wanting the knowledge and the wisdom of His creation to come into and putting it all together. So that's why I think we were seeing so many beautiful results with people who are already getting good results. It's that combining of everything. And we were doing a class on supernatural healing miracles and inner healing. And that was really what we did during our first year. I was kind of surprised because the Lord He keeps expanding what we're doing. And I'm never expecting what He is having us shift in our own work. So this year, we've expanded out, like the class that I'm doing now, where we're covering this wonderful area of Pleasanton, Dublin. I guess Castro Valley is part of this area too, or no? Is part of the area as well. So it's a big area, it's a wonderful area. And had I been doing our regular program from last year, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be with so many of you in this area where I can actually bring it here and make it much easier. You don't have to go to Palo Alto or Sunnyvale. It's really good to come to your area. And we're doing a lot of this. We're in Santa Cruz working, teaching a whole group of churches in Santa Cruz, and we're up in, we'll be starting a training program for medical doctors and nurses who are in Vacaville. So we're all up and down the whole Bay Area. And I love that we're going regionally because I think it's really special to do that and to have a disease focus as well as anatomy and physiology. Very important to do this. So I'm really glad to be here with all of you doing this today. And also we've started, just in a little over a month ago, live streaming what we've been doing. We're actually working with people all over the country now who will never come to the Bay Area likely and take these classes. And the first live stream that we did, which was just a little over a month ago, we had 35,000 people join us. It's a lot of people, at least I thought it was a lot of people. Now we're getting 350,000 people. I mean, it's amazing what God is doing. Dr. Denise and I were live streaming a little bit just before we came in. We already have 100,000 people. That is how hungry people are to be well. They're not getting well. And I say this as a medical doctor. They're just not getting well from us. We're well-meaning, we're well-trained, we have a dramatic understanding of how the human body works. I mean, better than anyone. People from my field, Susan Faulkner, who's in the medical field, I mean, we're very well trained to understand how the body works, but our therapies are not very great. And there's so many aspects, for example, what I'll be training you on today around cancer, that we don't have any ability from the medical field to correct these things that I'll be sharing with you. That's why a class like this I think is so helpful, because God can correct it. Some of these things that we can't do in the medical field, we can pray into though, and God can do the correction that we can't do medically. Just to give you one example, because we'll be getting into this in the class, which is you cannot have cancer without DNA mutations. It's just part of the deal. And we can't correct these medically. We don't have, phenomenal therapies that just correct everybody's DNA mutations down the line. Doesn't exist. That's why we never guarantee healing for cancer. And that's why people relapse so much. You can never be sure without correcting some of these things, like the mutations, that you're going to stay cancer-free. And as a doctor, I've seen people, relapse after a year or two. They might relapse after 5 or 10 years. But if you want to be completely healed of cancer, only God can do that. And of course, He can do it. We do see people where they never relapse again. But it's a true risk. And that's why combining what we know medically and bringing it into prayer, bringing it into wherever we can in terms of lifestyle modification, it's very helpful to combine the two. That's where you have your true permanent healings. I'm not going to be talking today about autoimmune disease. That'll be for another class. But that's a very common issue. Again, there's at least 80 autoimmune conditions. Again, we have no ability to cure autoimmune disease. We put people on drugs, medication. We try to slow up the inflammatory process. We try to reduce the pain. But you're never healed. The best we do is we get you in remissions. But people often don't stay in remission. So this is where, again, the combination of these is really helpful. It's brilliant for the Lord to give us the ability to combine both. Let's see, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention. A couple of other things. Our ministry is really busy. Like this month alone, I'm doing 24 events. That's a lot of events. They're either healing events or they're training events. And so, again, there's a lot of interest in not only the understanding of the human body, but how to combine it with prayer. And God is having us do one other thing, which is, from the medical side, what are we trained to do? We're trained to give you prescription drugs, recommend over-the-counters, do biopsies, do, office surgical procedures, casts, emergency room medicine. If you're a surgeon, of course, you're doing some pretty heavy-duty surgical things. But we really aren't trained in the medical field to do much in terms of empowering the person. And God added one other part to our ministry this year, which is beside the training that we're doing here, and we do a monthly internship out of our side of the bay, but He's also having us start to train people in how to be healthy. And I think that's really crucial. We're not trained very well with this medically, but I think it's crucial that people know that their lifestyle is absolutely beyond important in terms of healing illness. And Pastor Brand and Pastor Susan were, of course, they mentioned the all-important thing about love and inner healing. I absolutely couldn't agree with you more. The way our body is conceived by the Lord, and I'll be going into some of this neurologically as it relates to cancer, is the same chemicals regulate our mind and our body. It'd be great if we think, we have mind chemicals and we have body chemicals. It doesn't work that way. They're the same chemicals. And depending on your vulnerability, they either may make you depressed or anxious, or you may end up with cancer or an autoimmune disease as a primary focus. But what I've seen as a doctor and a minister is that you cannot separate, as both Susan and Brent said, the mind and the body. It's impossible. If you're physically sick, it's going to be affecting how you feel emotionally. And how you feel emotionally is going to affect your body. Because again, we're working with the same chemical pathways. So that's why it's really crucial to be aware of this and know that as you pray into these things, you're healing the whole person. And that's a big deal. Without healing the whole person, we're not healing the way that the Lord created us. So it's really important to know how to do this and be aware of it. So I'd like to go ahead and turn to the presentation that I have for today. And I'm going to be talking about, as Brent mentioned, and Susan mentioned, not only how to work with any kind of cancer. What I want you all to be trained to do is it doesn't matter what comes to you. You can treat anything. It doesn't matter if it's a stage 1, easier to work with cancer, or it could be, metastatic, terminally ill person. It doesn't matter if it's a carcinoma or a sarcoma. Those are different kinds of cancers. Or a leukemia or a lymphoma. I want to train you all in such a way that it doesn't matter what comes to you. You can pray for healing effectively for anything. I want to share with you as I start a testimonial that just occurred that was a beautiful experience over the last 2 weeks. And because I'm doing so much ministry all over the place, it's not unusual for me to do 6 or 7 healing and training events a week, just because we're kind of all over the place. And so I was in the North Bay about 2 weeks ago, a lovely church. We had a wonderful time ministering there. And a woman came in, she was rolled in a wheelchair, and she was wearing a nightgown. I think I shared that with you guys, didn't I? Oh, I didn't share that with you? Oh, it's a really cool testimony. I'm glad that I'm sharing it. So she comes in a wheelchair wearing a nightgown, which you don't usually see in church that often, at least I don't. And big frown and, tearful. She was not a happy person. And so I did the ministry, and then at the end, I didn't know anything about her in particular, but I did call people forward into small groups. There were some of us from our ministry, some of the other doctors, like Dr. Malu Cipriano was there, and Dr. Denise was there, and Dr. Ann was there, I think, as I remember. And so I took on the cancer people, and what I ended up with was a bunch of small group with cancer, and then a lot of other horrible, horrible conditions, people who were in rejection of organ rejection and multiple infections and kidney failure. It was just a lot of stuff that needed some healing. So I made sure that everybody got prayed for, and then that night and the next day, the emails started to come in, and I got email after email after email from the pastors of the church and the woman in the wheelchair and her best friends. Now, what it turned out is that this is a woman who's had cancer for 12 years. She has a sarcoma, and it's completely incurable. It's one of these horrible diseases that medically we're completely pathetic at doing anything about. I mean, it's amazing she lasted so long. It's a serious, serious kind of cancer. And probably we see fewer healings of this cancer than even a bad one like pancreatic cancer, which is a really nasty cancer. I mean, she would, from the medical side, just be a big zero. And not only that, she was really miserable because for 12 years she has not eaten. She has a feeding tube in. And she can hardly breathe, and she can't have normal bowel movements, and she's in constant pain, and she's terminal. And she comes from a medical family. Her husband's a medical doctor. They have the best capacity that you could possibly have, and she's still terminally ill, in constant pain, can hardly breathe, can't eat, can't go to the bathroom, so it wasn't a real good scenario. So I did the kind of program with her that I'm going to be training you all in today, and the beautiful thing about it was she initially, when I started to pray for her, she said, I literally felt like I was going to throw up. And what happened was, as soon as that happened, she said by the next day I was completely different. She said nothing was there anymore, gone, after 12 years, and considered completely hopeless and terminal. And I was really excited about this. So her husband, who's a doctor, takes her to the cancer specialist. They can't find anything. It's like she's healthy. And then the family is not Christian. They are a Jewish family. They have no experience with God or Christ. But they were so desperate that they came to the church. I don't think they'd ever even been in a church. And they had a Passover meal. And the best friend of the woman emails me, tells me about the Passover meal, and said this woman ate everything in the house. They said there was nothing she didn't eat. Whatever could be eaten, she put in her mouth. And it was everyone from the synagogue. And she said they spent the whole night talking about Jesus' miracles. So I thought that was pretty cool. he was like going to heal the whole bunch of everybody, like miracle, miracle, miracle. So anyway, I thought that was really very positive, very exciting. And I've seen her one other time, big smile. She wanted some additional prayer for her DNA. She said, I'm coming back. So she got some DNA prayer, but big smile, husband, big smile. And again, it's just a beautiful thing because she was so depressed and in so much pain and hopeless. No chance of healing, and look what God does. And I love God so much because he's so kind and so caring. And he just wants us all to be equipped. So there's no weak links where something should be done and doesn't get done the way God would like it to be. So let's go to the first slide. So this is just a little definition. And what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going through some slides, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to have you all do praying over each other, because we did that last time. I'm even going to do it a little bit more this time, because it's really important to not just have it be a mental exercise. It's really important for me to have you all start to pray over each other, even if it's, you know, some pretty medical technical information. And you can always keep looking at the slide and the sheets that you have. Take notes on these things. And I want to give you all homework. Like, if it were up to me, I'd be like the teacher telling you, like, every day, practice, practice, practice. It doesn't matter if you pray for one person or 5, whatever you're comfortable with. But the more you pray into these things, the more it's going to be a super blessing to everybody that you pray for. So again, this is just a definition. What is cancer? So again, it's diseases in which abnormal cells divide without control. That is the hallmark of cancer. Unregulated cell growth. When your tissues and cells are healthy, it's regulated. Functionally it's regulated, and structurally it's regulated. It's like the body of Christ in the Bible, where, you know, some of us are prophets, and some are healers, and some are teachers, and some see miracles. That's how the Lord created our bodies. So your lung cell is going to look different and function differently than the neuron of your brain or the cell of your bladder, because every one of these was created by God to be functionally and structurally distinct. And what happens when you have cancer is you just lose this. You just end up having cells that do not function the way they're supposed to. They lose their healthy structure, and you end up with these cells that are just unregulated. They'll just grow and grow and grow, and we want to shift that forever. Yeah. And again, I also mentioned here, cancer cells also spread to other parts of the body through the blood and the lymph system. So not only are they unregulated cell growth, but they want to take over your body and have no good function, which is, you know, if you have a lung cell, you want your cell to help you breathe and take in oxygen, the breath of life, right there in the book of Genesis. If you have a heart cell, the heart's a pretty complex organ. You know, it has 4 chambers, it's got an electrical system, it's got coronary arteries, it's got valves, you know, it's complex. And you want all of these parts to work and have the proper cellular structure and function. And again, we just start losing these things with cancer. Another reason why it's really important to know how to pray into this is that cancer and heart disease, what are they? They're the 2 most common health issues that we see statistically. They're number 1, number 2. So, and it's really important to know how to pray for this for everybody, because maybe a certain percent of you here today may have already had a cancer diagnosis. But what you have to understand is that how these things begin to differentiate from a normal cell is a progressive function. And I have a picture of that as we go on. But when you have normal cells with normal structure function, and they start creating, unfortunately, that shift, often you just don't go overnight from normal cells to cancer. There's usually a progression. And at any point in the progression, you're still at risk of going all the way toward cancer. there's different categories. We see what we call hyperplasia occurring in cells. We see dysplasia. As these things get more and more abnormal, we move toward the cancer, and someone might be at a borderline cancer where it's not, they haven't broken through all the, the cell membrane and start to spread and everything, but they're right on the border. So that's a protective thing. I like to see everybody be prayed for, because you could be developing a cancer and have not a clue that that's what's going on in your body. And that's where the preventive part of medicine is really important. Whether it's lifestyle or prayer, it's really important to be aware of that, because we really don't want you to only get prayed over when all of a sudden you've got breast cancer metastasized to your, liver and lungs, or prostate cancer in the bones, or whatever. We want to get this stuff so it just never develops. So that's why I think it's really critical to know this information. So let's go to the next one. And then this is a good slide to be aware of, because I'm going to go over these things. Okay, what do all cancers have in common? Again, I listed 4 different categories, but they all have things in common. Uncontrolled growth of cells and invasion of normal tissue. DNA mutations. That's one of these non-negotiable issues where doctors will never guarantee you that you're never going to get cancer again, because we can't cure the DNA mutations. Some of them are major. They're at the level of your chromosomes. They're big deals. And God can heal these things. It's amazing what God can do. So we want to get DNA mutations and get rid of them. We want to pray them out and have your genetic material no longer coding the wrong way. It's like example that God's often showed me is it's like having an instruction manual for your car, and you have a Toyota manual, but you're driving a Dodge. So your manual is totally wrong for what your body needs. It's the wrong manual. So we want to have your mutations gone. We want you to have the proper instruction manual. Then you start to get into that place where you're really getting the protection that you need and should have. Primitive cellular metabolism and energy production. Cancer and other diseases do not run on what we call a healthy cellular metabolism, and I'll explain that. And then loss of normal cellular structure and function. Again, the things that your cells should be doing when they've turned cancerous, they're just not doing it. And that's a big problem. So let's go ahead to the next slide and talk a little bit about mutations. So what I listed here, now I want to make the point that every kind of cancer has its own specific mutations. A bone sarcoma or blood vessel sarcoma, their mutations will be different than a liver cancer or a leukemia. These things differ from cancer to cancer. And if you want to get very specific, you can always look up some very specific information about, a particular cancer and its DNA mutations. But I do want to mention that there are 4 basic types that you can pray for anybody and everybody, no matter what kind of cancer they have, and it will lead you to healing, because these are crucial. The oncogenes, I love to pray out oncogenes because they I said encourage, they stimulate unregulated cell growth. You do not want to have a ton of oncogenes in your body that are functioning. And this kind of material was interesting. When we were doing our class last year, we had 2 oncologists from Stanford. One was a research oncologist, super awesome guy, and then one was a woman who is an oncologist from Stanford Medical School who was training the interns. And so they went over not all of this material, but they at least touched upon it. And it's dramatic in how much it will help with your cancer healing. So you really just want to crush that. You don't want to have oncogenes that are, having immortal cells. You could have cell lines that go on indefinitely, just getting multiplied, 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 and they're not doing what the cells are supposed to do. So we need to take that down, and at the same time, I list here a few kinds of things from the genetic side that we want to pick up. For example, tumor suppressor genes stop cell growth and division. One of those is called the p53 gene. And in terms of cancer diagnosis, p53 is part of this family, and it's shut down in almost most cancers. It's just shut down. In fact, Kathy, who's the oncologist who was teaching our students last year, she actually even mentioned the p53 gene at Stanford, that they train the doctors about this stuff, because these things get turned off by the enemy or by whatever the issue is. You may have a family where there's just, tumor patterns within the family. Sometimes I'll pray for people, and there's just, they have cancer, but they may say they have 3 or 4 relatives with a different kind of cancer. So there's a progressive family pattern. It makes it very easy genetically to go from generation to generation, because it's a pass-through from the family. And what we want to call the enemy or the evil spirits, or whatever term you want to use, it's a no-brainer. If you have a bunch of tumors and cancer in the family, it's just going to go from one person into the next. The enemy doesn't have to work very hard. It's embedded in the genes of the family. So I pray that the p53 gene comes back on again. I pray for the tumor suppressor genes to be working again. We don't want uncontrolled cell growth from the oncogenes. We want to shut that down. So we need the tumor suppressor genes. The DNA repair genes, repairing damaged DNA. And then one of my favorite genes is the apoptosis gene. That's regulated cell death. This is an awesome gene, and totally created by God. We recognize it in the medical field, and we don't really understand it because it is godly, it is from the Lord, but we understand what it does functionally. And the apoptosis gene is it's a very valuable gene, because it not only shuts down cancer growth wherever it is in the body, but it's also a useful gene in terms of the regulating of cancer through the brain, which we're going to go into and talk about, because the apoptosis gene will get rid of neurons in the brain that are coding for cancer too. It's a really cool gene to be aware of. When you pray for getting rid of cancer, again, whether the person has the diagnosis or they have it in the family, and it's a generational curse, it's a family pattern that you want to be rid of, that's storing right in the memory center of the brain, it's storing genetically, it's polluted the neurons. We want to turn the things on that will keep you healthy and healed, and we want to get rid of anything that will encourage cancer. We don't want that. Let's see. Let's go to the next one. And I'm going to go over this, and then I'm going to stop for a little bit, because what I want you all to do is to start praying over these foundational things, like what do you need to do to get rid of DNA mutations that would be useful for everybody, even if it's not the exact mutation of that person's, type of leukemia versus another type of leukemia. You've got to be able to work with this. So let's look at some characteristics of cancer cells, because I'm going to be going through all this. The next thing I'll be doing once we do some practice on these first things is it's really crucial to be aware that healthy cells go through 3 chemical processes to create a lot of cellular energy. I mentioned adenosine triphosphate. That's the major energy currency of our cells. Well, this is crucial information. I have a diagram. You need to know how to work with this, because chronic illness like cancer, like chronic inflammatory diseases, chronic infectious diseases where people are just really harassed and they're just not getting rid of these issues. Because medically, we, like autoimmune disease, as I mentioned, we can't heal them in the medical field. We can work with symptoms, but no doctor will ever tell you that you're going to be 100% healed. Only God can do that. So cancer cells, as I mentioned here, go through a simpler process and create less cellular energy as ATP than normal cells. And I love to pray into the chemical process. I'm going to make sure you all know how to do it. Because anybody who's not healing and who has chronic disease that's just lingering, and it's lifelong, they get better, they get worse, they get better, they get worse. Often they're not going through the full chemical process of energy creation. What I've seen with patients is that when you can go through that full process, those are your healthiest people. Those are the people that you'll see, and a lot of little kids are like this, not all, but some, where they start to get sick. Like let's say you get sick and you get a really bad cold for a few days, and then all of a sudden you heal. You didn't even necessarily take any medication, but your own ability to heal is so strong because your cellular biochemical functioning is so strong that you make a ton of ATP. You make tons more than someone with cancer who's really struggling, or some of these other illnesses, and then you heal very quickly, and you heal because your own body has the ability to create healing within it. And I love that God created it this way, because it's not, He just does it for cancer. He does this for everything. So this is a really important thing to be aware of, because this is one of the ways that we stay strong ongoing. It's a biochemical cellular phenomena, and I want you all to know how to work with it. Again, healthy cells have normal structure, normal function, and to reinstitute that, again, it's all based chemically on having strong cellular function and a ton of energy. That's when you heal. Cancer cells lose that. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes, and I'm just going to have you all divide up however you want. And I want to introduce again Dr. Denise Rodriguez, who's with us, who is an incredible woman of God. And then Dr. Ann Hurst, who's part of our team. These are incredible, wonderful people, and have done tons and tons of healing prayer. And they'll kind of walk around if you have any questions, in terms of just the healing itself. So we'll take a little time. I'll watch the meter. But I'd love you to start working with some of these basic things. Particularly, it'd be great if everybody goes through the genetic mutation part and just pray, whoever you're going to pray with, let's just crush this. Remember, we're dealing with one of the two most common health problems in our whole country. So we're not dealing with something that hardly anybody ever gets. We see a lot of precancers, we see a lot of, people who are kind of at high risk but moving through those levels. We see this on lab testing. I'm thinking about one woman that I know who's a healthcare professional, wonderful woman, very strong in her belief in the Lord, and very positive about doing more, alternative, holistic, preventive medicine. And both of her parents died of cancer. Her father, who was a heavy smoker, died of lung cancer, and I think the mom, trying to remember if the mom may have been breast cancer, I'm not sure. But both of her parents died. They weren't particularly aged, and because she's inherited their DNA, she takes really good care of herself, but her tendency is more toward these precursor issues. She's very aware that they're dangerous. She's also a cyst creator in her body. So again, she has more of a tendency towards unregulated cell growth, but it's not to the cancer level. And so so I was sharing some of this with her, and she doesn't, you know, she's got 2 kids of her own, and she doesn't want to bring down the generational curse from her both parents passing on from this and other relatives. So again, this is very important just from the protection side. So I'm gonna let all of you now do this. I'm gonna not talk for a minute here, and any of these things that we started with, I would totally recommend that you begin to pray for, like, you know, healthy DNA of cells. We don't want oncogenes creating unregulated cell growth. We don't want cancer metastasizing. Oh, you want me to pick the? We don't want cancer metastasizing into blood or lymph. So you can, anything I've given you up till now, you can pray this.